Good morning, everyone. We're trying just jumping in here because the stream thing is, is actually kind of difficult, and I have to turn off the sound on here. Oh, it is turned off. Okay, so we're all good. Starting the show, is different with the stream, so apologies. I'm not as smooth, but that doesn't matter. It's all good. Trump and his new tariffs, August 1st coming in, and he's offering, or he's telling us 35%, which is just bonkers. And at the same time, I'm hearing that the USMCA is exempt from this whole thing. The UK economy is shrinking, and that's no surprise because, they're trying intentionally to destroy the economies of all of the Western world, I think, at this point in time. And it's very, very obvious. They're not even really trying to hide what they're doing. And other than calling people who pointed out crazy and the censorship stuff, it doesn't seem to matter. But they're not hiding it. That's it. And the NDP are looking at a 6-month leadership race. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. Today is also Friday, July 11th, 2025. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we got to start with Trump. And Trump is talking about the tariffs, a new trade war starting in August, right? Happy birthday. August 1st. I digress. Food professor says, U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to impose 35% tariffs on Canadian imports on August 1st in a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney posted on social media tonight. Supply management and dairy are specifically mentioned in the letter. I've talked a lot over the years and since Trump's been around. He mentioned it during the first Trump presidency. He's mentioning it now, right? This is something that is central to Trump's belief system. You have to give him this. He's going to harp on it forever if you don't. And so I don't know how this is all going to play out. It'll be interesting to see if supply management is taken out by the president of the United States, Trump no less. People have been wanting the end of supply management for a while. It's been kind of a fight. The dairy farmers certainly don't want that, but I think a lot of people, it's outlived its usefulness and is now a trade barrier, interprovincial trade barrier, more than it's a stability tool to make sure that everybody has enough milk and all of the rest of it. So it's one of those things. Australia and New Zealand unwound their supply management system over 10 years in the late 90s into the 2000s. And the first 5 years we're unwinding the supply management and big payouts to quota holders. And then the last 5 years, it was basically an open market and quota holders were just paid out for their quota. So people were made whole. This way, I don't know that we've got the time to do all that. And it's funny, the government, with the help of the Conservatives, I think even passed the C-202, which was to protect the supply management, and Trump doesn't care, right? So yeah, call whoever back you need to call back, but make this happen, because if it doesn't, he's going to be angry and will have a financial impact, although maybe not as big as people think. The USMCA exemptions will stay, it seems. So here is the White House on White House letterhead. Alberta Success is sharing this, and dated July 10th. Dear Mr. Prime Minister, it's a great honor for me to send you this letter in that it demonstrates the strength and commitment of our trading relationship and the fact that the United States of America has agreed to continue working with Canada, despite Canada having financially retaliated against the United States. As you will recall, the United States imposed tariffs on Canada to deal with our national fentanyl crisis, which is caused in part by Canada's failure to stop the drugs from pouring into our country. Instead of working with the United States, Canada retaliated with its own tariffs. Starting August 1st, 2025, we will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent into the United States, separate from all other sectorial tariffs. Goods transshipped to evade this higher tariff will be subject to that higher tariff. As you are aware, there will be no tariff if Canada's or companies within your country decide to build or manufacture product within the United States. And in fact, we will do everything possible to get approvals quickly, professionally, and routinely. In other words, in a matter of weeks. If for any reason you decide to raise your tariffs, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by, we will add onto the 35% that we charge. So if you do reciprocal tariffs, your tariff amount, if you do 20%, it'll be a 55% tariff because we'll increase ours by that amount, right? So, wow. Pretty crazy. So he's nullified Canada's ability to counter tariff, and we'll see what happens next, I guess. The letter goes on. This is from Trump, by the way. Also, I must mention that the flow of fentanyl is hardly the only challenge we have with Canada, which has many tariff and non-tariff policies and trade barriers, which cause unsustainable trade deficits against the United States. Canada's charges extraordinarily high tariffs to our dairy farmers, up to 400%. And that's even assuming our dairy farmers even have access to sell their products to the people of Canada. The trade deficit is a major threat to our economy and indeed our national security. If Canada works with me to stop the flow of fentanyl, we will perhaps consider an adjustment to this letter. These tariffs may be modified upward or downward depending on our relationship with your country. You will never be disappointed with the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. With best wishes, I am, sincerely, Donald Trump. So there you go, President of the United States, on a letter to Mark Carney while he's on vacation. A whole bunch of people, I've seen a whole bunch of takes on this saying that Mark Carney is, or Donald Trump is not going to follow through with this like he didn't follow through last time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think maybe that's not a good negotiating strategy. You're not taking this seriously enough, I don't think, personally. Pierre Poilievre is responding to this. He says the latest tariff threats are another unjust attack on Canada's economy. Canada has long been a reliable partner and trusted friend to the United States. These tariffs will damage both our countries. All Canadians must come together to defend our economy. Conservatives stand ready to do everything we can to secure the best deal for Canada by the July 21st deadline the Prime Minister has set. Our country stands united. So, saying, yeah, whatever Mark Carney says is really, really not convincing for the leader of the opposition, right? There's a whole bunch of space for improvement in that statement, I think, personally. Dan Kelly is responding to this, and Dan Kelly is a pretty reliable source. He's the president and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Not to say he's always truthful, but it seems that he shares from reliable sources a lot of the time, or he at least believes what he's sharing a lot of the time. Brian says, our update on this, reported by the intrepid Josh Wingrove, Trump set to keep tariff exemptions for USMCA goods, according to a U.S. official. President Trump's plan to raise the 25% tariff rate on Canada to 35% on August 1st, but leave a USMCA exemption unchanged, a U.S. official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. USMCA-compliant goods poised to continue to be exempt from levies. 10% tariff on some Canadian product not set to be changed. Official cautions the plan is fluid and not yet in writing. So don't count your chickens before they're hatched, but maybe, right? Maybe that's good news for some Canadian companies that rely on that kind of stuff. But who knows how long our auto sector will continue, because at this point in time, Donald Trump has been very clear. He wants American cars made in America. Now, up till now, he's included the USMCA in that made in America kind of pact, but he does want Canada as the 51st state, right? So, and he's been very plain about that. BUAC says Trump putting 35% tariffs on Canada because Carney thought passing this bill would protect supply management, but Trump doesn't care. So yes, the Senate passes a bill to protect supply management from any future trade deals. So you can, if you could pass that bill, you can undo it, right? Like no problem, good and quick. So very interesting. David Bexty, who's an MP, and I think he's Saskatchewan, Parliament from Bow River. Where's Kean from? Darn, I can't remember. He says the Prime Minister needs to cancel his vacation and get back to work before he causes a recession or worse. You can't run a country on banking hours, Mark. And Watson says it appears from his latest post to us minions that he is working. He's just not working within the parliamentary system. It's more like he's turned himself into the chairman of the Corporation of Canada, jet setting here, meeting over there, signing whatever at that little desk. Right. And that's not our system. Right. So very interesting, because I guess Mark Carney's working, but just not doing anything that is expected of the Prime Minister of Canada to do at this point in time. Just ignoring things, right? Mark Carney, 15 hours ago. So this letter was sent in the mid-afternoon, right? Like I didn't mean to hit that like that. The letter was 9:51 p.m. Maybe it wasn't sent mid-afternoon. It was sent in the evening. I don't know. There's no time on the letter. I started seeing things. I've been ridiculously busy. I was up really early this morning, but I was super busy yesterday. I've got a story to tell, but it's not really in the scope of this show, so I won't waste your time with it. Maybe I'll talk about it at the end of the show, maybe. But yesterday was almost a complete write-off. It's ridiculous. And so apologies if I don't know the timelines on things, because I just started paying attention at like 8:30 last night. Mark Carney says, I spoke with Prime Minister. This is at 7:09 p.m. I spoke with the Prime Minister, so he would reasonably know there's something coming. Like Trump said he was going to give this thing on Monday, right? Carney's got to be prepped for this. I'm sure there's back channel. I'm sure that he had an idea of what was coming, right? Like, and instead of responding to this. Maybe this is to calm people down. He says, I spoke with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Macron, President Zelensky, and close allies today as part of the coalition of the willing. We reaffirmed our united support for Ukraine's sovereignty. What? And together, the coalition confirmed our collective efforts to exert pressure on Russia. I outlined Canada's latest support package for Ukraine, military aid, infrastructure loans, and sanctions targeting Russia's shadow fleet and energy revenues. Canada will keep standing with Ukraine to secure a just and lasting peace. Huh? Super weird. A just and lasting peace in Ukraine, but we're in the middle of a trade war with the United States, our closest trading partner, right there, like just right there. Nothing. You got nothing to say about that? It's weird. So we'll see how this whole thing works out. It seems like the EU and Canada are trying to isolate Russia, but also the United States, to make the case that we're being very reasonable, and Russia, and by not mentioning the United States at all, by extension, the United States are being unreasonable. And we're looking for a lasting peace. And these people are just not willing to give Ukraine $40 billion a month for being Ukraine, and also all of the BlackRock contracts we want, right? BlackRock, whatever, right? So very, I don't know. Everything seems, well, yesterday we did a Speaking Moistly, and for some reason the recording stopped at 45 minutes, but the stream finished fine. So if you want to watch the whole show, go check out the Rumble broadcast or the Twitch or whatever. They're everywhere now. But we were kind of talking about that. And it was an interesting conversation, so check it out if you're interested. CTV News is reporting, moving on to a little bit of grab bag of elections. CTV News says NDP plans to launch a 6-month leadership race, choose their leader in March 2026. So March 26 is 7 months from today. And so there's 6-month leadership race, and then a month to count the votes to make sure that the right person wins. And then, you get it in March. So is that... I don't think that the NDP are viable. I think that the NDP are going to fold. I think they're bankrupt. I think that their fundraising has collapsed to a point where they're not able to pay their bills. They don't get any money from the government because they lost official party status in the last election, right? Didn't they? And so Jagmeet Singh has completely screwed their party, and they're done, right? Jack Layton set them up pretty good because they own property. Now they're kind of done, and they need a 6-month leadership race. Things like this drag it out, and you don't get a direction for 6 months, but you get a bunch of communists trying to vie for leadership, and the brass at the NDP party aren't going to do a damn thing about it. We should probably not have any political parties at all. It should just be independence. There's a better way to run things. I'm sure there's a better way to run things. The Remanded is highlighting some problems with the BC election, and one of the ways they steal elections are having a black box of who knows how many votes at the end of the night to count after all the other votes are counted. And that black box gets created by having out of constituency voting. So if I'm in a different constituency in Ontario on election day, I can still vote, and that box will then be counted at some point in somewhere, somehow. It'll get counted properly, and only one time, definitely. And so because that's created, they can then manufacture as many votes as they need to win the election for whoever they want, right? And this is just one vector of attack, potential vector of attack within our system currently. This happened in BC, and here's the Remanded to explain. Elections BC Bill 11 says late ballots and why that matters. Does anyone know how many blank ballots or how many, quote, late mail-in ballots were accepted into the election? I don't. Not on October 28th final count, not on April 17th statement of vote, not on May 27th in the 92-page report. In fact, April 17th, they merged separate voting categories due to, quote, secrecy of the ballot. Image 1, pay attention. Well, he goes through each one of these to highlight this, and I think it doesn't translate very well. So if you want to verify, please, the link is in the description, or you can just check it out right here, right? The Remanded. And I think that there are so many of these vectors, both push and pull, like both you can't advertise because your name's Faith Goldie, and that might damage Rogers' reputation. You can't do this. You can't have people in the subway because I feel scared. Your violence makes me feel scared. They do these things to dissuade people from even trying. And then on the backside, they've got things like a black box of votes in every riding that they can count after all the other votes are counted and say, oh man, can you believe that they won by 6 votes? Wild, after they disqualified hundreds of other votes for whatever reason. And just crazy stuff. I have a hard time believing in the validity of our elections. It's really, really hard to sit there and say, oh yeah, man, one, it's definitely true that they're doing exactly what they say they're doing. And two, I have faith in the process. Like, how can you say that? And then, but there are pundits who won't even question it. Like, look completely past it, right? Like, oh, there's nothing here. How about that flooding we're having, right? Like, they don't want to see it. And because they're not allowed to report on it. So why bother seeing it, right? So I get concerned. And if you don't have faith in the institutions, if you don't have faith in these things that we pay for, lots of money for these people to do these things, and we're just being lied to. If you don't have faith in these things, how do you fix that? If you can't fix that, then the next step is, well, you just live with the terrible broken system. Is that the only choice? You just live with it? We can't fix it? Is that the only answer in Canada? There's no possible way to fix it, so we have to live with all of these broken institutions? That would suck. That would suck if that was the truth. Oh, I forgot to update the name. That's the worst. I forgot. I've got to get a checklist before I go live. I was caught off guard today. I thought, I'll just push the button and everything will be fine. Mark P. We're getting there. We're dialing it in. We're getting there. Peter Sweden says, a German state has now banned people who are members of the right-wing AfD party from working in the civil service. This includes public sector employees such as police officers and school teachers. The AfD is the second largest party in the country. What's going on with democracy in Europe? Well, there's a guy here actually who's talking about it. Yeah, we'll put this here. This is what's going on with democracy in Europe. This is really what's going on. This is if you pull back the curtain a little bit. Here we go.
Is that even Rachel Reeves, even though she's what we call in Yorkshire thick as two short planks, the fact is, she knows perfectly well that if you tax the non-doms to force them overseas and force all the billionaires and millionaires and all their companies with them overseas, that is going to lose you revenue. She knew that when she taxed the private schools, that would mean all the private school kids are going to have to come into the public schools and she was going to lose revenue on it. She didn't care because it's all about destroy, 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 kill, kill, kill. That's what communism is all about. They know what they're doing. They are working with hostile actors and foreign regimes that do not wish us well. Because the Labour Party does not wish this country well, they wish to destroy us. Until you understand that, you understand nothing. That's the trouble we're facing here. They really mean us harm.
Okay, and there's got another minute. He drives the point home even more, and I don't think he's wrong, right? I don't think he's far off. And the fact that there's whole industries of people who purposely, enthusiastically look past it and find something else to talk about, anything else to talk about. It's incredible, right? It's incredible. Alberta separatism is pointing out something that I talk about a lot. And Alberta's vote is neutralized by the Atlantic Canada. Period. All of Alberta's seats are neutralized by Atlantic Canada's seats. So not only do Ontario and Quebec have an unbelievably high number of seats during an election, but Alberta doesn't matter because it's nullified by the East, right? And so if the Liberals get the East, they don't care. Done. They're done because that zeroes out the West. Right. And and even in the Senate, here's Jeffrey Rath, and he's talking about this. And I'm glad that other people notice this. I'm glad people talk about this because it's important, because my son has a really, really finely honed sense of fairness. Right. And I think that people have a finely honed sense of fairness, and our system is not fair. And people say, but it's representative. It's this, it's that. Yeah, but it's anything but fair. It's not fair. It may be a whole bunch of things, but it's not fair. And so can we bring fairness? Should we balance it? Should we balance it in a fair way? Or is that a problem somehow? Why is it the way it is, right? And I think it's the way it is because of gerrymandering and people being encouraged to check out, right? People being encouraged to not pay attention to this stuff. And I mean, yesterday, Greg asked me, why do you do the show? Because I was like, I think it's all fake. I think it's all fake. I think we're being, like, the gerrymandering, the nullification of Alberta, all of these things play to the black box of votes. I think all of these things play to this whole thing is just a pantomime. It's just a fake pantomime. And Greg said, why do you do the show then? Like, if you think it's all fake? And because I love the pantomime, because I love it. But I like watching the actors, knowing that they're actors and what part of the show is happening right now. And I think it's so interesting to watch people realize that it's a show, because I think I've known it's a show for a while, right? And so we're watching this pantomime, and we're impacted by this. I'm not saying it's a null story, and I'm not saying their show doesn't have real consequences, but these people are actors playing a role, selling a narrative, right? And they do this through gerrymandering, making us think that we're on board with this, making us think we're participating when we're not. We're not, because mathematically they hold all the cards, right? Anyway, here's Jeffrey Rath talking about this, and I find it so interesting. Here we go.
I mean, just quickly, Senate seats as an example, right? Newfoundland has basically, double the population of Red Deer? They have 6 Senate seats. Prince Edward Island has 4 Senate seats. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick each have 10. So collectively, the Maritimes, right, with half the population of Alberta, collectively they have 2.5 million people. They have 30 Senate seats to our 6, right? I mean, just quickly, Senate seats as an example.
30 Senate seats to the 6. And I went through other examples there. Wild. Absolutely wild. So is that tenable? I mean, it's been tenable up to now, right? So people participate like it really matters, right? Your echo chambers tell you that it matters. People say this is the biggest election ever. It matters a lot, right? But I don't know. I think it might all be preordained. People might already know pulling the strings. And who pulls the strings? Who knows? Let's do our grab bag of governance. Danielle Smith says, great to connect again with His Excellency Ido Moed, Israel's ambassador to Canada, during a visit to Calgary for Stampede in 2025. Alberta and Israel share strong opportunities in innovation, energy, agriculture, aerospace, and advanced tech, and I'm excited to keep building on those connections. All right. So anyway, Dacey says the RCMP is trying to backpedal and CBC is running cover for them. Too late, guys. The internet is forever. So Dean is highlighting this. The RCMP issued a statement after receiving massive blowback after their spokesperson said Canadians with traditional values are extremists. The link on the CBC website has been removed, though. So they're taking down news that people don't like, so people can't share that news and say, can you believe one, this is real. 2, can you believe this, that the RCMP would say those traditional values are akin to terrorism, right? These traditional values are extremists, right? And so this might open some people's eyes. So what do? They take it down and they pretend that they never said it. Don't worry about that, citizen. And they run cover. The CBC runs cover. The CBC is supposed to do the job of holding the government to account. You said this. What did you mean by that? Why would you say that? And sometimes heads would roll. If somebody came in and said, this person should be fired, the chief who allowed this person to be in the position they're in should probably be fired. Heads should roll, right? And the CBC should be leading the charge saying, this is inappropriate. People are not extremists for having views like that. It's inappropriate for the police to say this. And they're not. They're not doing their job. More than looking past these things that are happening and reporting on anything else, please anything else, they are actually removing reports that would help the public understand what's really going on. And so that's, again, if this is Columbo, if this is Matlock, this is the smoking gun, right? We see that you had premeditation. You took this down to mislead the public. But misinformation and disinformation is a problem? Sure is. And we're the ones being fed misinformation and disinformation. Oh, it's awful. It's awful. Here's some BC Ferries information. And Aaron Gunn says, the Liberals and the NDP are trying to gaslight Canadians into accepting that the $600 million taxpayer subsidy to BC Ferries to purchase ships from a state-owned shipyard in China is somehow justified because there were no Canadian bids. 2 things. Here's a quick thread. First, the reason that there were no Canadian bids is that the contract was structured in such a way as to knowingly preclude Canadian bidders. C-SPAN, for example, has openly and repeatedly stated both its desire and ability to construct large vessels for BC Ferries, just not at the timeline and price of a shipyard in China that uses 7 times cheaper labor, Chinese steel, and is an arm of the Chinese Communist government. Secondly, even if BC Ferries had a pressing need to deliver these vessels immediately, you should have a plan to gradually replace aging ships laid out years in advance. There's no reason why they should be purchased from an adversarial nation like China. This is a country that is currently engaged in unfair trade practices, has imposed malicious 100% tariffs on many of Canada's agricultural goods, and has been deliberately trying to expand its shipbuilding footprint while its top geopolitical priority is the annexation of Taiwan. The fact that not only was this decision made by our government, but is being subsidized using taxpayer money is an insult to workers in British Columbia and taxpayers across our country. Under the Conservatives, all federal support for this acquisition will cease immediately. They don't get it. These guys don't get it. I think the Conservatives, even if Aaron Gunn really wanted to do this, I think somehow, some way, it would get gummed up, messed up, screwed up, and the Conservatives would end up championing it and doubling the contract and getting 6 ships for the price of 4. And don't you know a good deal when you see one? Why would you look a gift horse in the mouth, right? Even if it's subpar steel, right? Come on, you don't do that, right? They're trying to be friendly, China are. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh, darn. I don't believe that the Conservatives are... Sometimes I think that the Conservative MPs believe what they're writing. I believe Dan Bongino at the time when he was talking about Epstein stuff. I believe that he believed what he was saying then. And now I think something maybe happened. And so even the guys who, like Aaron Gunn, who sound like, man, bulldog, blah, 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 this guy's going to go after it. He's a freshman, right? He's a freshman MP. Maybe he doesn't know how things work. Maybe he hasn't triggered the conversation yet where somebody calls him in and says, if you keep going, you're going to be kicked out of the party. You know, if you got to cool it down. I have a feeling at a certain point, people get read in and realize like, no, man, you're part of the machine now. Right. And so it's one of those things where just a matter of time, I think. And these people eventually end up like the Kash Patels and Dan Bonginos of today. Right. And it's like, oh man, they said all the right things until they didn't. And that's the feeling I get about all the Conservatives. They come in and they're like, man, we're going to fix this. And then somebody tells them, you're not going to fix this. And then they either leave the party and try and fix it from outside the party, change tracks of government, right, from provincial to federal or vice versa, or just leave politics altogether. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Canadian Doge says, poll suggests half of Canadians want to volunteer to be drafted into the military. Kind of funny, don't you think? Really? So, according to the Toronto Star, half of Canadians want to be drafted? I don't think so. I'd have very severe doubts about that. I don't know what the methodology of the poll is, but the methodology of the polling is really, really bad. And oftentimes it's like 700 people across Canada. Sure. Like I believe that. Yeah, it's definitely weighted by weight. Sure. Here is Mary. She says, I need to have a cataract removed. On the health questionnaire, it asked if I've been vaccinated for the vid. Why? I answered no, but now it's kind of troubling me. Am I being paranoid? And Kirk reminds us that an Alberta woman, actually multiple people, were denied organ transplants for not being vaccinated. And I wonder if that's still going on. So I'll keep an eye on this story if I can and try and let you know if she's successful in getting her cataract removed. It would be terrible if people were being denied healthcare due to not complying with the vaccine. Here's a little bit of gender ideology, gender wang stuff. And Ryan says, why is CBC Kids putting out videos like this? Some days I'm a girl, some days I'm a boy. Our state-run media needs to be defunded now. So this is what we're paying for with our tax dollars. And viewer warning, it's communist claptrap nonsense. Here we go.
I love to run and play basketball with my friends. And I like to get dirty. But I am not a boy. I'm a girl. I like to play basketball too. I like to play dress up and wear dresses and put jewelry on. I want my hair to grow down to my toes. I was born a boy, but I am a girl. I like to put jewelry on too.
Huh. Grooming on TV. It's weird. I remember Pokeroo, and Pokeroo was never trying to sell me nonsense like this, right? There wasn't anything like that. So it's very concerning that the state broadcaster is going in that direction. And I don't know an effective way other than what's been done by people like Riley Gaines and the people who are very publicly fighting this. I don't know a good way to fight this, like at a community level. There's a lot of people who are really good at engaging at the community level and getting things done. The best roofer guy, I think that's his name. He's incredible. Like the things that he's able to do, and he doesn't back down. And I mean, he's very, very firm in his beliefs. And holy cow, he can go into a room and really, really yell at them. And like, if I did that, I feel like I might get into some kind of trouble. So I don't know, but I'm known because of my YouTube channel. But this guy's got songs. I don't know. Good for him. Like good for him. He's found a way to effectively fight back, and great job. I don't know. Maybe you just have to go hard at them, right? And maybe that's the model. I don't know. Western Standard says UCP members are submitting proposals calling on the party to add Alberta independence to its policy. It's not going to happen, guys. It's not going to happen, Alberta. Alberta, you need to know that if the UCP has anything to do with this, they're going to foil it. And I don't want to be right about that. I just think that the UCP is an instrument of the broader Canada within a united Canada. And the UCP's got an incentive to stay in Canada, and they want to stay in Canada. And so if they become in charge of the separatist movement, it's not going to go the way the citizens want. It'll go the way the party wants. And maybe that's not the way you want to go. So I'm just saying, I don't live in Alberta, okay? But if you want to self-govern, you should self-govern and not allow political parties to have a say, because I don't think they'll go in the direction you want them to go in. And I may be wrong about that. This is an interesting story. MAGA, this is Spencer, and he's great. He's got 65,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he does some investigative journalists, again, that I feel if I did, somebody would show up at my door. Somebody would be like, Mark, and sometimes I think it would be hilarious to do stuff like what Spencer does, right? And I think to myself, man, if I do that, like what kind of lines is that crossing? And people like Spencer do a great job at tap dancing on that line, right? And good for him. And however, Northern Perspective is suing Spencer for a joke that he made and words that he didn't say. He implied that there was an incestuous relationship between Northern's Perspective producing children. And he goes through it in great detail here. But it's the whole, he's offered to apologize, and they're still wanting to sue him for damages and all sorts of stuff. So it's a crazy story. It's a 17-minute long video. That's kind of that's the sum up at the beginning there. But isn't that crazy? This is creators going against creators. But this is kind of what I mean. If you have a beef with somebody, then there are tools now. We don't need new online tools or anything like that, new criminal code that specifically targets online. If you do something that rises to the level of criminality or rises to the level of whatever that the courts see actionable, and if there's something that the police, you have to stop this because this is harassment or this is this or this is that, then you can test that. You can arrest the person. You can say this is the charge. Then you can bring them to court and test that. You don't have to wait for something that says online people can't do this, because people can't do this online or offline. So it's interesting to me. I wish Spencer the best. I don't think that he deserves the lawfare that's happening because of this. He goes through, again, what's going on. So if you're interested in more of the details, check it out. I'm sure Northern Perspective has their stuff too. I'm agnostic on the whole thing. I don't talk about other creators specifically, and I'm not even making jokes about anybody. I try not to. Some people, I guess, I talk about, and just vis-a-vis the information they're bringing you and who's influencing them and things like that. But I find it all so interesting. So best to Spencer, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we're at around 33 minutes, so we'll kill the stream. The stream's working better. I'm excited about how that's going, although my entries and my opens are suffering because of it, because I've got to it's a lot more complicated to start the stream with regards to the show production. I'm using OBS through Rumble Studio and then rebroadcasting through Rumble Studio to Rumble Studio Locals, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Twitch. So all of those are being multicasted at the same time. And so in order to start that, I have to start the stream on OBS and then start the stream on Rumble Studio and then start the recording. And it's just more complicated. So I apologize that it's rough, but it's going to get better. It's going to get better. I promise you. By the end of the summer, you're not even going to notice. It'll be great. It's going to be wonderful. Okay. Thanks for watching on the stream, everybody. And we'll catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we'll carry on. Net zero is a big deal. Ben says Mao at least wanted industrialization, factories and farms. Many people have compared environmentalism to communism. Oh, I forgot to stop the stream. Here we go. See, I forgot to stop the stream. Anyway, communism and said the Greens are actually Reds. That's so 20th century. Environmentalists are worse than communists. But it's all communism. I think it's all communism. Mark Nixon says, is it worth protecting a $22 billion industry at the risk of $200 billion in tariffs? The math, dairy, $22 billion. Total exports to the United States, $583 billion. Trump's 35% tariff equals $204 billion in added costs annually. So we're risking nearly 10 times the size of the dairy industry for supply management. This should have been at the beginning of the trade thing. But it's not a good deal. It's not a good trade. We shouldn't do it. And we're making a mistake. And the mistake is compounding. And nobody is in any kind of correction mode whatsoever at all. And that's concerning. That's very, very concerning. Tom says, Britain will bankrupt itself before it admits the truth about net zero. Yeah, I think that that's true. For a country already drowning in debt, it's surely now official. We can't afford it. Can't afford net zero. And Canada's in the same boat. And nobody is interested in the reality of that because they're interested in pushing the fantasy of net zero and the fantasy of the idea of green communism and open borders and the 2030 agenda, essentially. Bernie is talking about the 2030 agenda, and she says the relentless push for automation won't create growth. There will be no growth. The more we automate and the more efficient businesses become, the faster the majority of people become unemployable, shrinking the labor market, which means they will have no money to spend and won't pay tax. But we still rely on mass employment and it's tax to fund everything. So nothing will be funded. Politicians can pretend everything is normal, but growth is coming, and you can continue to believe them if you like, but I can't. So Prime Minister sets out a blueprint to turbocharge AI. Artificial intelligence will deliver a decade of national renewal as part of a new plan announced today. So they're touting AI as this panacea of wonderful, amazing progress. If you've ever tried to do anything concrete with AI, and so writing a WordPress plugin, writing an Android app, and write it with the thing, it gets lost. It loses its place. It doesn't know what you're talking about. You can reference earlier points in the conversation. Within the same conversation, you can scroll up and see like that point discussed and acknowledgement of the point. It gets lost, man. I did this 2 weeks ago. I was trying to develop a plugin that was similar to Ranker or Reddit with an up and down arrow. But it was just going to be within a single post and list items in a post. And you get up and down. And it was relatively straightforward, right? And it kept getting lost. It wouldn't do it. It wouldn't do it. So a children's book, it wouldn't do it. There are things it can do well. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying that it's not what people think it is. People think it's this panacea of everything. It knows everything about everything. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. Sometimes it's just making a guess, man. So again, very skeptical about this AI thing. AI is going to be a replacement for the kids that my generation isn't having right now, or didn't have in the last 10 years because they believe that the planet is overpopulated, or they believe that climate change is going to be a big deal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here is these guys talking about the birth rate. Do you know Children of Men? Do you know the date that movie is set? 2027. 2027.
How bad is our birth decline?
It is shockingly bad. So we are now at 1.6 per woman. Our replacement rate is 2.1.
Wow.
It is going to be a shock, a huge shock, when our generation ages and there's no one there to do important services. This is how civilizations die. Like, who takes care of boomers when they're in their 80s and 90s? If you do not have a generation of workers, society starts crumbling. I'm a firm believer that the most important institution in America is the family. The family used to exist to take care of the people who were weakest. Now the state has to take care of them, which is why you see a lot of these people on the street. Oh, well, we went from 2.1 to 1.6. That can't be that bad. I mean, in a couple generations, that means that our population has shrunk by half.
In a couple of generations?
Yeah, but I actually think the bigger problem is cultural and spiritual. Feminism did change the memes and the culture, but no one talks about when you introduce birth control into a society. All of these declines in the industrial world started at the exact same time that the pill was introduced. Something magical changed in the 60s and the 70s. Abortion was made legal in 1973. Other nations followed. There's a reason why the birth rate is so low in these countries.
How bad is...
So, birth control and abortion being legal were all in 5 years. 1967 in Canada and then 1973. Maybe my dates are off for abortion in Canada. That was 87. That was 87 in Canada. 67 was the introduction of the birth control pill when Pierre Elliott Trudeau became prime minister. Yes? No? Was it before that? May have been before that. 62? Wild. And do other countries use the birth control pill as broadly as Western countries? Do like Middle Eastern countries use the birth control pill really broadly? Do Asian countries use the birth control pill? I know China's got a very, very strict, like what, one child rule, two child rule, one child rule.